when you look around Bulls Nation right now, you get a lot of varying opinions. You get the Bulls fans that still are holding on to optimism. You get the Bulls fans that are over it, think that the roster should be blown up completely. And then you just have the Bulls fans that kind of sit in the middle right now in a place of misery. And that's where the Bulls as a franchise sits right now. They're in the middle of the pack where it's kind of hard to see the future. But on today's episode, we'll be breaking down the Bulls versus Knicks part 2 going down today. We'll also be talking about other things surrounding the Bulls community at your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, Chicago Bulls Central. Let's go ahead and get into that intro.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
All right, Bulls fans. So the Bulls will face the Knicks today for the second time at home, which is just a weird part of the schedule overall. And, you know, with where this team is right now is in such an interesting and just kind of disheartening place for many, frustrating place for some. And when you really this team just hasn't sustained a level of play. That's really just what it is. They have no one thing that you can bet on this team doing each and every night. But as they face the Knicks tonight for their second home game against them, and their second of 3 times facing them in the next week and a half, at the end of the day, when you just look at this Bulls team and what they need to do is just take care of business, right? I'm past the point of like predicting Bulls wins, Bulls losses, Bulls this, Bulls that, because at the end of the day, we just do not know what version of this team we're going to get night in and night out. Are we going to get the team, the scrappy, hard-fought team that just fights their ways to victory, that executes, that moves the ball, that does these things? Are we going to get the team that stagnates, the team that can't hit shots, the team that can't defend a lick, right? So the last time we had a game against a team back-to-back, which was the Toronto Raptors, we did lose that first game. We came back with a very good game plan that really took away most of the things that the Raptors did good against us in that first game, and the Bulls fared very well. They got a win in that second game. Could we repeat that tonight against the New York Knicks? Now we know what they're going to do. We know all this, but when you look at the Bulls and the way that they lost this game, the fact that one of the poorest shooting three-pointer teams in the league, we allowed them to have a huge night against us. At some point, right, and I know I keep saying this, at some point, this team has to just look at themselves and ask, why are teams having these huge nights against us even when they're not good three-point shooting teams? That is down to the coaching scheme. That is down to the players' execution. It's down to the overhelping on defense. There's a lot of things wrong with this team. But even in the game against the New York Knicks, in that second half of that game, we saw the team kick up and ratchet up the defensive intensity. It's just so weird how different this team is defensively in the first half of games versus the second half of games. And while, you know, it's easy to say if they can just sustain that level of play, it would turn into wins. Yeah. But can they, right? Why can't they? What is going on mentally with this team to where they just have been unable and unwilling in some cases to sustain that level of defensive intensity needed for the games? We know we can score, right? The Bulls, as much as the offense, and I always clown it and say it's a 2005 offense and the offense is stagnant, which it is, the Bulls still find a way to score with most teams. Right? They find a way, even with the bad three-point shooting, even sometimes with the lack of assists, even with the turnovers, this team finds a way to put points on the board. Now, those things also need to get in hand because those are controllables for this team. Those are things that is completely within this team's ability to control. They just need to do it. And so in looking at this game against the New York Knicks, I've titled things before and said, is this the game that the Bulls could bounce back at and everything? Listen, there is no bouncing back in one game for the Chicago Bulls team. Where I sit right now is simply this. Until this team strings together a few wins, not just one big win, not just 2 wins in a row, until this team starts getting to the point where they're winning 5 out of 7, right? 7 out of 10. God forbid they can get to winning 10 out of their last 14 or 15. Until this team can do that and sustain that level of play big time, it's issues with this team. That's it, right? I'm over it, right? They can have a big win tonight against the New York Knicks, and guess what? It'll be fun. Don't get me wrong. I hate the Knicks. It'll be fun to see the Bulls beat the Knicks. I would love and be ecstatic to see the Bulls take care of business on their home court against a franchise that I love to hate, right? I respect the talent there. I still love to hate the franchise. That's not on the players. That's just on ownership and the fact that they're a terribly run franchise. But with that being said, is this right? I'm going to love if that does happen, but that still does not take away from the bigger issues surrounding this team. It doesn't. It does not take away from the bigger issues until this team can start stringing together a winning streak in a way. You don't even got to win 3 in a row for me. Can we win 4 out of 5? Can we do that? Can we win 2, lose 1, and win 2 again? Can we do that? I need to see more from this team. We deserve to see more from this team. And so coming to get tonight against the New York Knicks, do I hope that the Bulls execute? Yes. Should they execute? Yes. Should they take care of business? Absolutely. Should they look like a competent team? Yes. You re-upped your coach. Should that coach be able, in facing the 2 team in a mini series, be able to come back with a better game plan than he did in game 1? Absolutely. That's what you're paying millions of dollars for. Can Zach LaVine shoot better? Can DeMar DeRozan have a complete game as well, even though he is great in second half of games? DeMar has been putting up a lot of sucky ass first halves of games this season. I know we have the fit issues and the fit concerns and how well this team actually does fit together, and those are all 130% valid. All of that is valid. But until this team shows us more, I'm sorry, I'm over the point of just getting super hype and asking, is this the one that turns it around for the Chicago Bulls? Because the answer is probably no, right? It's probably no. Until this team shows us, right? There's no more of me giving the goodwill. Like, don't get me wrong. I still trust this team. I still think that this team has the ability and they have the talent to turn their season around, but you got to show me, right? And the first step in that hopefully can be against the New York Knicks tonight. But even then, like I said, until we start seeing more of a win streak, more wins put together, I'm only predicting so much. The Bulls got New York tonight. We got Minnesota Sunday. We got Miami next Tuesday. We got Atlanta Wednesday, and then New York again next Friday. The Friday game, and then that's it. That's all the games before Christmas. And then after Christmas, the day after Christmas, we face the Houston Rockets. When this team is going to get above 500, I don't know. Ask them. Ask them when they want to be above 500, right? But tonight, this team needs to play solidly. This team needs to play that defense. They need to set that tone defensively. They need to execute better. They need to trust their trust the players you have on this team. At the end of the day, you're already sinking. You can't sink anymore if you try to develop Patrick Williams and let him run some point forward, right? You're not going to sink anymore by when Io is back, allowing Io to develop as a point guard. Hell, I can even go to say this. You're not going to sink anymore by giving the damn rookie that's talented some minutes in Dalen Terry. This team needs to figure out something, and trying to do the same thing night in and night out. And eventually you just have to realize it's not working. And that's to the front office as well. You can keep that bet on continuity all you want, but if it's not working, guess what? You look foolish if you keep thinking anything's different's going to happen. Now, again, that's not to say that it's time to make that decision now, but it's getting close to it. But let me know what you guys think of everything down below. Are you fed up like me? I'm over trying to predict Bulls wins. I'm just over it. That's where I sit right now. I'm not trying to predict how these games are going to go for anymore for the Chicago Bulls. I'm just going to say what I would like to see from them, what I think they need to do, but I can't predict any wins from this team. I just can't. You let me know what you guys think on that down below. Now, a report came out yesterday that the Bulls are more than likely not going to be sellers at the trade deadline, and you just heard the voices of 10,000 Chicago Bulls fans complaining that the Bulls aren't going to be sellers. You just heard it. They just crushed their souls. It's like a million voices reached out and then were silenced. Yeah, I hear that. But much to the dismay of many Bulls fans, as far as this team not being sellers at the trade deadline, it still does not mean they're not going to make any moves. Now, part of that report did say that this front office believes the Bulls can make the playoffs when healthy. When the hell is that going to be? Yeah, let me know. When the hell is that going to be? Because I would love to know. I would love to know when everybody's going to be healthy. And if let me know. But with that being said, is this, right? Just because the Bulls aren't technically going to be sellers at the trade deadline, what that means to me is that they're not looking necessarily to move any of their big pieces. That does not mean they're not going to listen to deals. That does not mean that they aren't going to be buyers. It just means that they're not the ones actively shopping. But it could still something comes down the pipeline for this team. Am I confident in it? I've told you guys all season, I doubt a major move is coming for the Chicago Bulls, but I do think some type of move is coming. It could be buyout, it could be trade. But we'll see. I do think something is eventually going to come. When you look at this roster and you see what this roster is missing, when you see that this roster is just missing something, right? Hopefully AK and Eversley see that as well, and they are looking at what they can do to try that they can overcome that. And so if the fact of the matter is this team is lacking size that hurts this team at times. And I know some Bulls fans, I think especially knowing that we came into the season lacking size, sometimes it's kind of overblown on how big that is, because Javonte and Derrick Jones Jr. played pretty good in their minutes, even at power forward. But I do think we all do agree that this team does or should, especially if they can add quality size and depth, they should do that. Now, there are some trade candidates that are more realistic than others. Harrison Barnes, if he's definitely bought out. PJ Washington, who seems like he may be available, right? But we don't know if the Bulls are going to be willing to give up what the Charlotte Hornets would want for him. Jay Crowder's one that's out there. Once that Jay Crowder, I really do think once that Jay Crowder domino falls, you're going to see a lot of other trades, because right now Jay Crowder may be a backup plan for a lot of teams, especially teams that are on that borderline of contending. But when you look at this, and Bleacher Report recently did an article on possible trade targets for each team, and I think this is more speculative than rumor-based or things that were heard. But in this article from Bleacher Report, they mentioned 3 possible trade targets, and I like all these targets, just depending on what the deal needs to get done. PJ Washington was listed as one of them. That's a guy that we've been talking about since parts of last season. Jay Crowder was mentioned. Jay Crowder, we all know, been mentioned since basically this offseason. And Denny Avdia, is that how you pronounce it? Which is interesting because a lot of Bulls fans thought we should have drafted Denny instead of Patrick Williams. But, and I'm looking at these trade targets and thinking, these are trades that are all realistic because it's adding to the nucleus, adding to what this team already has, and some of those missing pieces, rather than this huge blockbuster type blow it up deal that, some journalists and some outlets have now gone with that narrative with the Chicago Bulls. Do I think that these deals are likely? We'll see. I don't know if the Washington Wizards are going to be willing to give up on Denny already, and if that is, what does it take, right? Let's say they would take, let me ask you guys this. Let's say they would take Denny for that Portland pick and just matching contracts, which he's on a rookie scale contract, so it's not that hard to match. Would you guys be interested in Denny? I don't know how much he necessarily solves for the Bulls, but he does bring another wing that can defend, can shoot the ball some. I like that, like the concept of Denny. We all know what Jay Crowder brings. We've talked about that all season. And I love PJ Washington. I would love the idea of PJ Washington being on this team. Let me just be clear that I would love that for what that means for the future. And now, especially if you don't give up Patrick Williams in that deal, and then you kind of have them as your 3 and 4 going forward. But let's see what happens with that down the line for the Chicago Bulls. We'll see. They even mentioned PJ Washington is playing some small ball 5, which again, considering Billy Donovan, any of that's possible. But we'll see how these rumors continue to develop for the Chicago Bulls as we get closer to that trade deadline. We're about 55 days, I think, now away from that trade deadline. So we'll see what that future holds for the Chicago Bulls. Now, let's get into one last thing before we go, and that is Dalen Terry signed a deal with Adidas. Now, this does not mean he's going to have his own signature sneaker. It just means that he signed a contract with Adidas, so expect to see him out there in Adidas a lot. But, shout out to the rookie who hasn't really gotten any minutes, but is still signing deals. I really do think that there is a undertone around this Bulls team, but also just if you hear people, the way that they talk about Dalen Terry, especially after seeing him in the G League, I think people understand that Dalen Terry can be a baller for this team. Maybe not a star level player or anything like that, but he can definitely be a baller. Now, shout out to him for getting this money with Adidas, because listen, I'm down for everybody getting the most money they can. Get that bag, young man. But I wanted to mention it here that Dalen Terry did sign a deal with Adidas, which is just it's good to hear and see, considering the kid hasn't even played that many NBA minutes. But that is it for today's episode, at least so far. It's game day, so you know what that means. We'll have our pregame, our halftime hangout, and postgame shows all today here at Chicago Bulls Central. Make sure you're following the show at Bulls Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text and or voicemail, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related because of you guys. And like I like to end everything on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red and peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.